Thank you so much, Hannah. Hello, everyone, and welcome. Our question for this evening is, what on earth are we eating? Food, so the blurb says, is the new sex, drugs, and rock and roll, the new art, and the new religion. Intelligence Squared here at the Royal Geographic Society have come up with the perfect panel, and they'll each be taking their turn at the podium to guide us through their particular corner of the foodie world. This is an Intelligence Squared debate. Well, it's actually an event, not a debate, but we really can't ignore the fact that the gathering of food and the shortage of it is going to be an increasingly urgent issue from now on. In short, all of us here this evening are immensely lucky not to have empty bellies, so one quick remark. I'm not a religious man, ladies and gentlemen, but permit me one heartfelt statement: for what we are about to receive, may we be truly thankful. As I said, this is an Intelligence Squared event. It is not a debate. After my brief introduction, each of our distinguished speakers will talk for 15 minutes. Immediately after each talk, there'll be 5 minutes of questions from you before the next panel member makes his way up to the podium. Yes, his. You will have noticed we have an entirely male panel, so we hope to hear from you women out there. Please familiarize yourself with the exit signs. Please make sure that you, the people with you, and the devices you have brought are quiet enough for the rest of us to be able to enjoy what is being said. All right, we have to get moving. After all, as our experts will tell you, it's steak and a pint night at Wetherspoons. So please welcome our aforementioned experts, including the absent, for now, Dr. Mark Post, Professor Peter Barham, Sam Bompas, A.A. Gill, and Dr. Mark Post. Ladies and gentlemen, our first speaker is A.A. Gill, shining star of the Sunday Times. Stuff sent to him has included toilet rolls, tampons, unidentifiable gunge and dog turds. He didn't expect to be a funny newspaper writer, but has been sharp, if not vicious, about the Welsh, the English, Norfolk, the Isle of Man, restaurants, chefs, TV programs, multinational or Jabberwocky cooking, mouth breathers, and 2 much-loved female television presenters. He shot a baboon just to see what it'd be like to kill someone. He doesn't like ugly people, which is why you've been vetted and are all so obviously beautiful. He's commented powerfully on reality television, he has sent careers into orbit, and he's written movingly about poverty in the Sudan. An admiring female observer journalist sent an email around saying, "Remind me why I'm supposed to hate A.A. Gill." A male magazine psychologist bitched him but confessed that A.A. Gill is loyal, witty, generous, clever, curious, and a genuine original. Ladies and gentlemen, A.A. Gill.
Good evening. It's nice of you all to come. I've had a call from Sam Mendes saying that he was furious we were doing this on the same day as his Bond opening next door. I don't really know what I'm supposed to be talking about. I do know an awful lot about food, and I've been writing about it for an awful long time, and I rather wish I didn't. I mean, there gets a point when it sort of gets in the way. And it would be better just to have food rather than know about it. And one of the things that I've come to the end of is cookery books. The recipes for things and the menus of things are the least interesting bit of food. It's like studying music and only looking at the dots. The thing that really interests me about food is not what we eat, but why we eat it. Why do we eat what we eat? We are possibly the only species that craves variety. A dog will eat the same tin of doggy slops every day and might complain if you try and change it. We moan if we have to have chicken more than once a week. But actually, it's a myth that we crave variety. We eat very little. There is something, I did look it up and I'm terrible with numbers and I can't remember, but there's something like 200,000 species of plant. And we really only eat, on a large scale, we only eat about 5. And they're mostly grasses, so rice, wheat, maize. Then we eat some legumes, soya. There are even more animals and fish and birds, and we only eat about 6 or 7 of them. So what we think is an enormous variety is in really the same thing over and over and over again, but dressed up differently. It's a bit like, having to sleep with the same woman all the time and making her dress up as a chambermaid and then Maid Marian, and then just for the variety. So what I was really worried about why we eat what we eat, why do the French eat French food and the Germans eat German food? I mean, obviously, everybody should eat French food. But why? They basically live in the same field. They have the same weather. They grow the same things. Why is our national food different? Why is Italian food unknown in Italy? Because it's so separated by areas and by cities that one town will eat a different food from the next town. Why do we identify ourselves with food? I haven't got an answer to this, by the way. This is just a series of questions, and I'm hoping you might tell me at the end. But years ago, I did an experiment, and I went to Botswana to go and see the Bushmen. The Bushmen, are our oldest relatives, or we're their oldest relatives. I was at a place called Kai Kai, which has had, they know from archaeological remains, has had the same group of people visiting it for 32,000 years. I mean, obviously not the same people, but you know what I mean. And I have this theory that why we eat what we eat is because of who we are. And we think that our food, our choices are personal. We think that, because inside our mouths is there isn't anywhere more, well there is, but there isn't really anywhere more personal than inside our mouths. So what we put in it is really down to us. But actually, Germans like German food and the French like French food. So it isn't really down to us, it's social. It's tribal. And I have a theory about that. I have no proof. So I went to Botswana and I went to see the Bushmen and I went hunter-gathering with them. Hunting is really great. The gathering's a bore. Guess which one the men do? Going hunting with the Bushmen is like going to play golf. They put their bags of spears and stuff on their backs and they just go off and chat and they sit under a tree. And they talk and they smoke and then they go home and they go, no, it was dreadful, we couldn't find anything. What's for dinner? And then when you say, we spent all day digging up this fucking root, that's what's for dinner. Anyway, no, what we did find, we found spring hares. Has anyone seen a spring hare? They're really, really sweet little things. They've got great long legs. They look like kangaroos, tiny little kangaroos with huge eyes and great big ears, and they're very furry and incredibly cute. And the Bushmen, they live underground in burrows, and the Bushmen catch them, and the first thing they do to them is break their legs. I know. That's what I said. I said, why did you break his legs? And they make little noises like children. And I said, why did you break their legs? And they said, first rule of hunting, never catch anything twice. So we had the spring hare, and then they caught a bullfrog, which they made me keep in my pocket, which was the size of a rugby ball, like that. And I could just feel it in my pocket, just squirming like that. Oh, that's hideous. I've never been so glad to see anything cooked. And jewel beetles. Jewel beetles, large green beetles, beautiful and delicious once you've taken the wings off them. And what I bought them were a lot of things that I thought they would never have eaten before. They live in the Kalahari Desert, so I bought them anchovies. and olives. And licorice. And a sort of space ice cream that NASA made to go to the moon, and God knows what it's made out of. Probably made out of all that stuff, actually. I don't know. And I gave it to them, and they were completely unsqueamish about it. They ate everything with relish. And what was really interesting was they identified in everything what they liked in it. So the olives, what they liked in it was the oil. Fantastic. Oil's quite difficult to get. A lot of the animals you catch are very lean. There isn't a lot of fat. You need fat. So things that have fat in them are valuable. Loved the olives. Liked the licorice. It tasted a bit like a root they had. Loved the anchovies because they were salty. Salt, again, is an important, if you're a hunter-gatherer, it's an important thing to keep salt. The sweet things they love because everybody loves sweet things. I mean, sweet is the one taste which we all around the world, everybody likes. It's the first thing you eat. It's mother's milk. And I thought then is that the Bushmen eat an incredibly varied diet. Often they eat the same thing over and over again for a month or so because there'll be a glut. But overall, their diet is opportunistic, and they will, if they have to, eat almost everything, including their clothes. The people who I found who have the most prescriptive diet were further up the continent with the Maasai, where I was in Tanzania once, and somebody said, is there anything you'd like to do when you're here? And I said, I'd love to go and eat with the Maasai. And so they said, fine, and they arranged for me to go, and we went to a corral in the evening, and a man came out and was very charming and said, do come in, and this is my wife, and this is my other wife. These are some more wives. My children, my uncle, my brother. And we had a sort of one lump or two conversation. Have you come far? You know, how are the roads? Very nice. Did you do all this yourself? And then he said, shall we go through? And so we walked through the kraal into where the cows were. And they caught a cow, like that, about its tail, like that, and put a tourniquet around its neck. And a man got a blunt arrow, and he shot the blunt arrow into the cow's neck. And this spurt of blood came out of the cow's neck, and they caught it in a gourd, like pulling a pint. And they stopped, and they picked up a fingerful of dung and put it on the hole in the cow's neck, and the cow went back to the other cows and went, I fucking hate it when they do that. and then the guy, well, we were still having the conversation about, do you think it'll rain, and you know, sort of, and he stirred. You have to stir blood. You stirred blood? You have to stir blood to stop it clotting. So you don't want the lumps in it. So he's stirring the blood with a stick, chatting, and he took the stick and handed it to a child, who licked it exactly like the pudding, you know, the spoon from the pudding basin your mother gave. He licked the stick, And then they handed me the gourd. And there's 20 people there going. Remember the Mau Mau? And I said, oh, I thought you put milk in it. And they went, well, we do sometimes, but we thought you'd like it neat, you're a guest. And I picked the gourd up, and it's bulbous at one end. And I picked the gourd up, and there's this unbelievable smell. I mean, just awful. And I started tipping it like that. And it's like, have you ever done a yard of ale? It's like the yard, because you know you're going to get a tidal wave up the spout. And I'm going like that. And I just get the whole lot. And you know what it tastes like? What the fuck do you think it's going to taste like? It tastes like steak. Obviously. And I'm going, obviously, what did I think cow's blood was going to taste like? It's going to taste like steak. It's delicious. It's like warm, liquidized, really good, rare steak. And when I get Alzheimer's, it's all I want to eat. So I finished lunch and went off, and as we were going, the bloke who was taking me back out to the road said, my tribe never does that. We would never do that. And I said, why? And he said, oh, no, because we don't, I mean, it's disgusting eating raw blood. You know, we eat other things. We eat maize. We're farmers. And I said, but the awful thing was, I said, the bowl, it smelled good, smelled disgusting. And he said, well, yeah, because they clean it out with urine. But the point is that the Maasai only eat their cows. They don't even kill them. It could count as being vegetarian. And I think that why we eat what we eat is due to farming, is that we identify what we eat with the land we live in. The Bushmen live everywhere. They'll eat everything. We eat what we think identifies us. There was a lot more of that, but I've got to now ask you, if you want to ask me questions, we can talk about it.
Go ahead. Hans, we have roving mics. Just a hand up.
While you're thinking about hands up, is there anybody here who ate something for the first time today? Hello?
Hello. Go ahead.
I used a pressure cooker for the first time.
Oh, that's just so touching.
That's an answer to some question, just not the one I was asking. But thank you for that. As they always say to the children in my infant school. Thank you for that.
If you'd put a bug in it or something, he'd have been
Did
happy.
anyone eat anything, an ingredient, anything, for the first time this week? What was it? Guarana. Yes. Well done. Did it do it for you?
Well, I don't drink caffeine, so it sort of apparently substitutes that in a natural way.
How do you know?
Well, I don't.
Drink caffeine and find out.
No, I have had.
Oh, okay. But it's interesting because we very rarely try new things. Almost everything we're going to eat, we've eaten. By the time, we're 10 or 11. We very rarely get to eat new things.
Gentleman at the back, right at the back. Or is it a lady? I can't see, forgive me.
Your sex life is interesting.
Hello. I just wanted to ask, it's interesting that the examples you've given are mostly about the immediately available things to those people whom you met on your travels. I think the difference here is that how many of us truly sort of forage for what's local or what grows nearby. We're buying oranges, we're buying all kinds of things that we don't grow in this country, and then we're doing all sorts of things to them before we ingest them. You've described some very sort of real things that happen to tribes of the Maasai or wherever. I just think it's interesting that we've mutated
The second half, if I'd had another 15 minutes of what I would have said to you, is that that was then and this is now. And now, the international food of all of us is pizza. The Maasai eat pizza now. The Bushmen eat pizza. Everybody eats pizza. Pizza is now the international dish. We have lost, when we call the Germans krauts, sorry, Catherine, we don't really think that we're calling it because they eat sauerkraut, cabbage eaters, or you know, the French frogs. You can't even get French frog legs anymore. The frogs are protected. Or that we're the palms after pomegranates. That idea of being identified with food, we're all just Neapolitans.
Thank you very much. We have time, I'm afraid, for just one more question. We may have some at the end. Yes, madam.
I was on holiday last year in France. They gave me a crepe with gésier, which I didn't look up till I got back to the hotel, and it was actually gizzards. So that was something very different, and I'm not sure I'd have tried it if I'd have known what it was. My question mainly is, there's an awful lot of talk about unusual foods, but actually we seem to have got away from people eating the stuff here that's sort of available and fresh. How do we re-engage people with actually food in general without it seeing something that's totally elitist, but getting the interest back, particularly with young people?
Well, really simple thing. Stop bothering about organic food. The great discrimination in our food has been between what is supposed to be organic and healthy and real and kind and friendly and has a picture of a fucking farmer on the cover, and the stuff that the plebs eat. The manufactured, the over-made, the processed stuff. When I first knew about food, it was right at the end of rationing. I was born in the last year of rationing. And there was a moment for us where everybody ate pretty much the same food in this country. It was all shit. It was basically mince and potatoes. And it was ghastly, and the whole place smelled of it. And we just pretended not to notice. And we made a sort of virtue out of not having bloody sauce on things. But the one thing is that we really were all in lunch together. And slowly food has gone back to being a thing that I thought we would never see again, which is an identifier of class and money. And the thing that really identifies class and money is the idea that I eat nice, happy food that died because it wanted to feed nice children called Jocasta. And you are going to die before you're 40 because you eat shit and you feed your children shit. And I mind that. I mind that more than almost anything else.
What a note to end on. Ladies and gentlemen, please thank A.A. Gill. Really excellent note to end on. Ladies and gentlemen, our next speaker is Professor Peter Barham. He's a professional teaching fellow in physics at the University of Bristol and visiting professor of molecular gastronomy at the Royal Veterinary University in Copenhagen. In Copenhagen, Professor Barham has given advice to Noma, which is judged by some to be the world's best restaurant. In the United Kingdom, he has tutored Heston Blumenthal. He's a prolific writer and broadcaster, and his previous lectures have included Ice Cream Delights, Why Do We Like Some Food and Hate Others, Kitchen Disasters, and A Passion for Penguins. I hasten to add that he studies penguins, he doesn't eat them. He's commented on the ingestion of liquid nitrogen, the many reasons why pancakes fail, and he is editor-in-chief of the journal Flavor. For him, a kitchen is no different from most science labs, and cookery may properly be regarded as an experimental science. Ladies and gentlemen, Professor Peter Barham.
Thank you. Molecular gastronomy. Who's heard of molecular gastronomy? Right. Who knows what it is? Now, I'm uniquely placed in this because I still am the only person to hold a chair in molecular gastronomy. And I can assure you, I haven't got a clue what it is. The name comes about because a group of people who are passionate about food and science and wanted to understand what actually goes on in a kitchen used to get together every couple of years in Sicily and have a great time chatting. And we excused ourselves by giving us a fancy title of International Workshop on Physical and Molecular Aspects of Gastronomy. Once we had a few drinks, that was too much to say, so we abbreviated to Workshop on Molecular Gastronomy, and that's where it comes from. Today, what I hope most of the people who are having fun with this sort of thing is we're trying to answer in a purely scientific basis the sorts of questions that you just heard. Why do you like the food you eat or dislike it? Why do you like something very much and the person sitting next to you hates the same food? Why do we eat what we eat? They're really good questions, and it's good science to answer them. Any scientist would say anything's good science. That's what I try to do, and a lot of us trying to do it. But what is a physicist actually doing trying to talk about food? What right do we have to do it? In the sciences, there are questions we happen to know the answers to by pure fluke. And those questions, a lot of other people don't know the answers to. So we can answer them, and we can look very clever. That's great. Great for me anyway. A question which I think you all know the answer to is, what are our senses of taste? You put food in your mouth, you taste it. Now, we all have a minimum of 5 different types of taste receptor for 5 different taste sensations on our tongues. I'm assuming because you're an educated audience, you all know what all 5 of those taste sensations are. Is there anyone here who might be slightly quizzical thinking about what they all are? Or is anyone... Oh, yeah? Bitter, that's one of them, yeah. There are 5. I won't embarrass you by asking you what they are. I'll tell you what they all are. They are salt, sweet, bitter, sour, and of course, umami. Now, to be honest, let's be honest, everyone put your hands up. If you've never heard of umami before just now, put your hand up, please. Right, that's about 1/3 of the audience. That's probably about average, I think, when I do this sort of talk. You all can taste umami, whether you like it or not. Now, there's a reason why we have these tastes. You heard just now, Adrian told you a little bit about why the people like, the Bushman loved his salty anchovies. That's because they are in need of salt. Salt is an essential nutrient. A hunter-gatherer diet does not give you enough salt, therefore we actively seek out salt in the diet. If we get something that's salty, we will eat it. We're programmed to do it because if your diet is that of a hunter-gatherer, you won't get enough otherwise. Sweetness is the taste of sugars. If you want to run fast, you need sugars. If you're a hunter-gatherer, occasionally you may have a small problem of being prey to something else, say a leopard. Imagine this leopard is coming up behind you. You've got to run fast enough not to get eaten by the leopard. Now, I'm not suggesting that eating enough sugar will make you run faster than the leopard. But what it will do is give you the good chance of running faster than the person standing beside you. Those of us with sweet tooths are survivors. Bitterness. Bitters, flavours are the flavours of alkaloids. Many alkaloids are toxic. Avoiding bitter foods gives you the opportunity not to kill yourself. There's a whole reason why we do eat bitter foods. That's something, if someone wants a question I can answer later on. We don't have time. Sourness, similarly, acidic foods can be dodgy to eat. There are other reasons why we have a sense of acid. Those are essential things we need to know about in our diet, which leaves umami. Umami is probably the single most important of these because umami is the taste of amino acids. We need to eat amino acids to build our proteins. If we don't eat amino acids in our diet on a regular basis, we cannot survive as humans. The others we can survive for some time for. Amino acids are very, very basic, and we all have to consume plenty of them every day. Well, every week anyway. Now, a particular amino acid is most difficult to synthesize in the human body. That is glutamic acid. So umami is the taste primarily of the glutamic acid, and particularly its sodium salt. Now, if you talk to a chemist, they will, of course, give these things proper chemical names, just as salt is sodium chloride. I won't tell you what sugar is. It will terrify the living daylights out of you. But the sodium salt of Glutamic acid has a very fancy name of monosodium glutamate, and of course it's often abbreviated by its initials, MSG. MSG is, whether you like it or not, an essential nutrient which we all eat every day. There are no, and I repeat, no known allergies to MSG. If you wonder where you're getting your MSG from, think of a few simple foods which most of you love, where you can actually see the MSG. Anyone here like cheese? Hard cheese? If you eat hard cheese like Parmesan, there's white crystals in it. Those white crystals are pure monosodium glutamate. The other place where we get stacks of MSG from is tomatoes. They're wonderful things. Take a tomato, chomp it up a bit, and the enzymes and the proteins interact and make MSG. Umami is the flavor of the pizza. That's why we love pizza. It's pure umami, nothing else. And a bit of other stuff in there as well, but that's what makes it so good. That's why it is your ubiquitous food. It's so tasty. Anyone seen this picture of the tongue? How we taste. Salt at the front, sweet around the sides, or sweet in the front, rather salt around the sides, and the rest of it. There's one really, really important thing to know about that picture. It's tosh. Complete nonsense. That is not how your tongues behave. Yes, we all do have distributions of different taste receptors around our tongues, but we're all different. For example, it happens because you can measure yourself, dip dilute solutions of tastants on your tongue and see where you taste them most strongly. I happen to know that I am most sensitive to saltiness at the front of my tongue and sweetness toward the back. My wife is the inverse. Which means when I cook for her, I have no idea what it tastes like when she puts it in her mouth. One of the reasons why we have different likes and dislikes is because no two of us will get the same signals going to our brain from the same food going in our mouths. We taste with our tongue, we smell with our noses, and we say, and every textbook will tell you, that flavour is a combination of taste and aroma. The problem with that is, it's wrong. If you want to know what the flavour of something is, you actually invent that flavour in your brains. I can't do a demonstration with all these people here in the short time, but I'll give you one to try at home. Get a bottle of white wine, get some red and some blue food dye, mix the red and blue food dye into the white wine until it looks red wine. It really looks like it. Don't tell your friends you've done this. Give them a glass of this coloured white wine and ask them to describe it. What they will do is they will swirl it around, provided there's something like wine, they'll swirl it around and they'll look very pretentious and they'll sniff it, and they will identify some of the aromas in there with red berries. So they'll say, strawberries, raspberries, oh, blackcurrants, oh, yes, oh, oak, yes, taste it, oh, it's definitely oaky. And then you give them the same wine without the colour and they'll swirl it around, look at it and sniff, oh, yes, elderflower, oh, grassy, yes, really nice and fresh. And they won't know they're tasting the same wine because their memory, which is what they're actually doing, has invented the flavour. And the flavour is different depending upon our memories. We form these memories in our childhood, and we use all our senses to decide what something tastes of, what its flavour is, and whether we like it or not. We worry about what it feels like. If you want to try an experiment, eat something nice and smooth, like a yoghurt, take a spoonful, rate it for creaminess. Take a second spoonful while wiping your hands on some sandpaper. Rate it for creaminess. It will taste slightly gritty. Take a third spoonful while wiping your hands on silk handkerchief, your partner's hair, whatever you happen to find is nice and smooth. I could make some suggestions, I won't. And guess what? It'll probably taste creamier for you. Serve food on a nice white china plate, and it will taste great. And the beautiful laid tablecloth with heavy cutlery. So the same food to the same people on a plastic plate with plastic cutlery, and it won't taste half as good. The flavour will be different. We build flavour in our brains, and it comes from all our memories and expectations. Now here's a question. Imagine that I could take you in a back room, and I could quiz you or your friends about your childhood. I could understand all the things you ate and liked when you had good experiences when you were a child, whether that was in France or Germany. And I will learn from that those things which, if I now serve them to you in a more adult, grown-up way, you'll probably like as opposed to dislike. And imagine I ran a restaurant in that way, that I could actually profile individuals as they come into a restaurant and learn whether they like what's going to serve them, what they're going to love and what they're not going to like so much. It's a long way off, but maybe we can do it. And if we can do that, then we can also start making you like healthy food as well as the unhealthy food, and persuade people organic food is no different from other food. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Professor Peter Barham. We really are running a little late, so I'm afraid we don't have a huge amount of time for questions. Anyone, any burning questions to ask? Hands up, please. Anywhere? Yes, one gentleman there, and that may be all. Thanks. Go ahead.
Are we trying to fight evolution when we're steering people clear of foods that are salty or sweet and reducing all the sort of sugars and salts in processed food? And MSG, indeed.
I mean, the problem is that we are naturally programmed to want those foods which are fatty, salty, and sweet. That is the things which would make us survive if we were not able to just go and get more food tomorrow. So the only thing you can do is try and provide food which people will want to eat even more, which is not so much of those things. But of those, fortunately, at the moment, I mean, obviously too much sugar, too much salt, and too much fat's not good for you. As yet, no one's found too much MSG. MSG is not good for you, but they probably will one day. But yeah, unfortunately, that's why we are what we are. We can't escape our evolution.
Thanks very much. Just one more question, and very briefly, please. Yeah, go ahead.
Very quick. We speak about the people's palate. Is there any? I mean, and we've only spoke about the tongue. Do you feel the flavors on your palate, or that's something that doesn't happen?
Okay, when you talk about the palate and what your appreciation of food, it is the combination of what's in your mouth and your nose and all your previous experience. And what you're actually doing when you're tasting something is you are comparing it to all the things you've tasted before and trying to make something that's similar. It's why most new foods taste of chicken, because it's the only thing you can think of which is so damn bland that it tastes like anything, because you haven't got any experience to put it against. It's also probably part of the reason why we are neophobic when it comes to trying out new foods. Most people don't want to try anything brand new because it is not something they can relate to in their memories.
Thank you very much, Professor Peter Barham. Obviously, I'm hurrying things along in the hope that Dr. Mark Post will still make it. He has landed. Ladies and gentlemen, our next speaker is Sam Bompas. He and his partner, Harry Parr, products of Eton and University College London, have quickly become England's leading jelly mongers. You know about some of their projects, including flooding a Grade 1 listed building with 25,000 servers of Courvoisier punch. This was all funded by the government. Their secret lies in gaffer tape, black bin liners, and unnamed pig products. Their hero is Peter Barham. Sam would like to create a Roman banquet for John Prescott, complete with vomitorium. And he loves the idea of an 18th century Neapolitan Cucagna monument with epic architectural structures and civic feasts where no one would go hungry, grow old, or work hard. Ladies and gentlemen, Sam Bompas.
Oh. Thank you very much. There's some quite surprising things you found out there about us. I think maybe some of them have changed as well, and we can tell you what you're into now. But when I was sat there, it's a bit of an exciting race against time, because we had some jellies, and they're slowly starting to melt, so I think they've made it through, luckily. When I saw who else was speaking, I was really, really intimidated. They're very serious speakers, and we do rather... Well, we just do, sorry, we do fun stuff, and it's less serious, but hopefully puts a smile on people's faces. And what I was going to do today was tell you 3 of our greatest secrets, because there's a secret life of food. I'm not going to talk about any moral issues or any deep insights, but hopefully you'll come away armed with 3 great secrets that you can then go and employ yourselves. So the first of them all is gelatin. Oh yeah, and I was also going to bribe you as well with jellies as well, just because we're talking about food, so there needs to be food on the table as well. So gelatin, it's where our sort of wobbly heart is. It's where we started off many, many years ago. And the thing that I find really, really exciting about food at the moment is the sort of amount of amateurs that are getting into the food game, shaking up the food scene, and doing really rather exciting things. And I think that one of the things that's brilliant about food is that unlike going into starting a property company or being an engineer or something, as you can start your very own food business and do amazing things with food from your kitchen table. There's a very, very low barrier to entry. And so almost anyone can go on and do great things with food. And I guess standing here on the stage as well is because we've come from doing just ridiculous things with food. We really wanted to have our own stall at Borough Market 5 years ago, and they flat turned us down. They said, no, you're absurd. And so we just sort of went out and gave people lots and lots of jellies, and here we were giving people innocent jellies. You would have thought that they had enough fruit products themselves, but we came and gave them away jellies for free at that VNP area for one of their village fetes. This is about a week after we started the company with. The jellies then were a little bit disappointing for about the first couple of weeks. I think we had IKEA Tupperware with which to jelly and wow people. But we quickly realized we had to try a little bit harder. Harry turned out to be, Harry was training to be an architect, so we used some of his architectural training to design jelly molds. And I think this is what's really exciting. There are lots of people coming at the moment into the food scene, applying sort of engineering, applying an artistic, a graphic design, lots of different sensibilities to food, and the results are quite extraordinary. But very quickly, through sort of using sort of architectural design, we're able to make a jelly St. Paul's Cathedral, but it's actually very, very small. It's tricky photography. Although we have managed to make a really big jelly, which I'll show you in a second. But then have been on this, just through really focusing on jelly and really pushing it out there, we found that there's something that really delights people about it. I think it's the sort of wobble is always good, but you kind of slap a jelly on the table and everyone smiles, or everyone's got their own sort of nostalgic jelly story. And so we've been on this absurd jelly adventure for 5 years. I'll just whip through it and I'll tell you the jelly secret, because I know I've got to get through. So you've made jellies for weddings, you've made jellies for funerals, realistically, and literally made jellies in a funeral parlour in Australia's oldest funeral parlour, which was possibly even more intimidating than this, because they were doing a panel on funereal foods, and there's someone talking about Chinese funeral foods and Greek Orthodox funeral foods and Jewish funeral foods and Christian funeral foods, and we had to talk about how jellies relate to funeral foods and somehow come up and do it sensibly. And there was some sort of reason. But the good thing at the end of it was some chap in the front row said, he booked his funeral then and there, because he's like, you guys really care about what my guests are going to eat. I'm being buried with you. So he put the deposit down and everything. So jellies are great. Jellies everywhere. We did jellies in the States. Jellies great. At fashion shows. Jellies are art in the San Francisco Museum of Modern Art, and they'll fluoresce beautifully. And jelly explosions as well. We're really into explosions at the moment too. But don't worry. What happens here? Oh no, here's where I feed you. This is brilliant. There are a few more people here than I had anticipated. I think I was going to get some helpers, maybe. No? Okay. So if we start divvying out spoons from the front rows and the back rows, and if you don't get food now, we'll work out. I'll think of something by the end. And there'll be. Sorry. There you go. There's some spoons. Fantastic. So Then we've got to see what jellies we've got. They're made up in my kitchen today. So this one's delicious. This one's probably my favorite. Actually, they're probably all alcoholic as well, so be advised. This one's gin prosecco.
Sorry, did you say they're all alcoholic?
I think they're probably all alcoholic. We'll see. So this one's gin prosecco, violet and elderflower and raspberries. I can go here. And then pass it along, have a spoonful and zap it around. We'll see how far we go. Right, this one is a plum and port. So maybe that could go to a back corner over there and then work forward. And then this one is a Guinness ginger and gold. And this one is possibly the most mysterious. And I've got here, they're made by Olivia from my kitchen. Is brilliant, and she makes all the jellies now. She's like the jelly queen. She knows more about jellies than I'd ever know. And she's just called this Peaches AA Gill. So I don't know if you've got a spoon and want to tell us what it is. I guess one of the things that really annoys me, I went to a dinner very recently. No, where are we going? I went to a dinner very recently, and they didn't tell you what the food was, and the chef keeps on coming round and said, can you guess what that is on your plate? And the problem is that a lot of people's palates aren't mega developed. My palate's not that developed. So I was having a really, really hard time. Oh, sorry, actually, your one secret with the gelatin, is we always use 1 leaf of gelatin per 100 ml or 100 grams of whatever you're making. That is our special ratio, and if you're unmolding it, it tends to work. It's set a little bit solid. If you're setting it in a vessel, I'll use a little bit less. But it means that if your dinner party's going on a little bit longer than you anticipated, it won't be a sad, sloppy puddle. You'll actually be able to give people something to eat. So that's the first secret. Okay, we'll go quick.
You're doing fine.
So, the second as well is, I was worried about my palate, and I think a lot of people's palates aren't as sophisticated as they can. Taste is very, very difficult subject to decode for many people. We live in a very visual world and a very literate world. People are very good with words and with vision. Think about how much time you spend in front of a computer screen as opposed to at the table. So what we really like to design for all the senses and do a total work of art, that's sort of Wagner's time. I won't even attempt it. But what we really try and do is go for an environment. And I think one of my favorite pieces of scientific research was done by a chap called John Edwards. And he took that dish, which is chicken a la king, and he served it in a number of different environments. So in a fancy French restaurant, in a student halls of residence, in an army barracks, and he got people to rate it. And of course, when it was in the really fine restaurant, they're paying lots of money for it, people thought it was brilliant. And then when they're in an insalubrious environment, they thought it was rather less glamorous. So I was going to say, if you're having a dinner party, go for giving people the clues that what they're putting in their mouths is amazing around the dish. Don't spend all your time worrying about what's on the plate, but worry about the decor, worry about how the menu's written. Forget what's on the plate. Just do a recipe that you know really, really well and can bang out. Sex up scrambled eggs with a bit of truffles in it. And for God's sake, about 40% of people who eat truffles can't even taste the aromatic oils in them. And so when they're sitting there going like, oh, this truffle's great, they're just impressed by the expense of it and the theatre of it. And this is something that we've always done. So this is about a month after we started, and there we're serving, we had to do a 12-course Victorian breakfast in 2007 for people. We're blessed by having a really grand room, and you can just see in the corner a waxwork of Queen Victoria. Which added a little something to it. But there we were, and people had the most amazing meal, and I think course 7, we're just serving them scones from Tesco's. but it's on silver. We ran out of time to make them, but it's on silver. It might have been to do with the fact that during the course of this meal, it was breakfast, then had creme de menthe whiskey, Burgundy, champagne, and Bordeaux as well. And by the end of it, none of them got up, which we thought was a good sign. But to more recent things, I don't know what this means. This is actually cooking for 50 people in Basil Jett's Temple to Sewage Crossness pumping station. People were able to have fun there, but it looks extraordinary. But yes, I'm always amazed by, because you do lots of cooking for people. There's one time, taste is important, don't get me wrong. Like, we'd like to put really good things in people's mouths. It's very intimate. But I was just always amazed. I was cooking for a load of barmen. These are people that spend all their time working with flavors. And I was doing a breakfast for them again. This time we were able to make the scones, but it was getting really, really late at night, and I just really wanted to go to sleep. It was about 4 in the morning. I had to get up at 6 to go and start cooking. And just made rock cakes. And they're the most, I was just back in my kitchen at home. I had cinnamon. I think I put some sultanas in. And they're pretty unsophisticated. But one of the chaps, he prided himself on having a really developed palate. And he stood in front of me, and he was picking out all these delicate flavors from this rock cake. And I was just sitting there just going like, yes, it's brilliant, as long as you enjoy it. So that's quite fun. This is Fiona Leahy. Whenever I want to get inspiration, Fiona Leahy design does the most incredible sets. If your table looks like that, forget it, you can serve whatever you want. But we also like to push the stuff that's on the table into sort of an architectural scale as well. So we've done things like make breathable clouds of gin and tonic, flood buildings with booze, and then everyone was able to drink that. The health and safety was quite a production, although actually the interesting thing was we really prided ourselves on health and safety for that. And we had this massive HACCP form, we had like big folders of it all, and Westminster Council, who are really tough, came round to do an inspection. And we were very worried, but dead pleased we were able to hand over this enormous great folder. And they took it away with them. And then we finally found out, because we're actually doing it at 33 Portland Place, which I don't know if you read the Evening Standard, and it's owned by Fast Eddie Davenport, who's amazing. He's brilliant. Look up his website and see all the brilliant photos of him doing a sort of grip and grin with every celebrity you've ever known about. And actually, it was just because they were using, the Chinese embassy was next door, and they wanted to make a case that he was having really, really debauched parties there. So, of course, this was the best case they could possibly make, because they had a full documentation of flooding the room full of 4 tons of cognac that people could paddle around in. So it crops up occasionally, but they say it's a swimming pool. We built it. And then recently we applied everything we need to make a drive-through beneath Selfridges, which was quite a lot of fun, because we started off with scientist Dr. Rachel Evans-Stewart. She did meta-research, putting in all the data as to how environment affects your sense of taste. So you could give people a really sort of full-on taste experience. That's what it looked like. All the colors were mapped into sort of colors that would enhance the food's taste. We thought it was great because the car's an enclosed environment, so we had these salami-based, meaty air fresheners that dangled from your rear-view mirror. And they smelt really good. There's a bit of burgundy. The aim was to make it like sort of Ferdinand Poin's restaurant, La Pyramide, just blasting into hyperspace as you went through. There was also a soundtrack as well, which was really epic, which was, it was all Bruckner-based. The guys from Mercedes were a little bit worried about it because it was apparently Hitler's favorite musician as well. And we're like, well, people are coming for a burger. They're not going to be that worried about the sort of ethical, it's a really good song. It's really good music. But also some things you can't code and you can't do science with. Roller Girls and the 4 Horsemen of the Esophagus as well. So anyway, I've got to wind up now. My final thing as well. I was actually banned 3 weeks ago from the Royal Geographic Society last time I came and did a speech. This is someone's Twitter picture of it. And they were quite worried that I was going to blow something up. I'm not going to blow anything up. But I thought that I'd tell you about my other favorite chemical, which is the greatest secret that I've ever discovered. And it's really quite something. But it's not dangerous. Don't turn the lights off or anything. So this stuff is great. You only need the tiniest amount of it. It's my favorite color, slime green. Basically what they do is they use it every year on St. Patrick's Day to dye the Chicago River green, and it just is unbelievable. It's kept a deathly secret. It's done by the Guild of Plumbers each year, and they won't tell anyone what the chemical is. We very, very cannily got a sample of it, sent it to the UK's leading dye specialist, dyes.co.uk, and said, what's the chemical? They said, oh, that's easy. It's fluorescein. So now you know. It's pretty easy to get hold of from dyes.co.uk. And it's unbelievable. It's also known as yellow 7 when it's an additive. But you just have a couple drops of it in water. Oh, sorry. It doesn't stain. Under sunlight. It degrades under sunlight. Okay, actually, no, I've got a cloth here. But it's brilliant. It's really amazing stuff. So that was just a single drop of it. And so we've used it when we flooded the roof of Selfridges to make a boating lake and float up bar, to make the world's biggest jelly. So that's the length of 2 Olympic swimming pools around a Grade 1 listed landmark. They were very trusting. It was a pretty intense jelly. There were some hairy moments in making it, but it was exciting nevertheless. But also just think what you could do with it if you had this much of it. Hurrah! And actually with this much, we could dye the entire Thames, which is something that we're speaking to the Environmental Health Authority about at the moment, because we just want to make sure we get full sign-off before we go ahead and do it.
Yeah, got it right.
So that's it. I'm done. I just thought it'd be fun to have a prize. It's your own customized, we're coming up to Halloween, so your very own customized Ouija tea towel. So you can not only dry your dishes, but summon spirits as well. And it will go, it's a limited edition. It was done as a piece of artwork for a gallery. And they said, well, how much do you want to sell it for? 250 quid, it's a limited print run. And we're like, well, it's a tea towel. Could we try $6.99? Like, they haven't really been our friends since then. But anyway, it's yours, worth $6.99 if you ask the best question tonight. And
okay. You mean the best question to you or the best question overall for the entire evening?
I suspect I've got one question.
Okay, please go ahead. Yes?
God, it's really good. If you hang it outside as well, this will degrade as well, so it'll go back to white.
Go ahead. Competing.
Have you ever sat in a bath of jelly?
Also,
have you ever used a pressure cooker?
Well, we have a front runner already.
That's a good. I'll go for the first question. You're hedging your bets there, I think.
No, fair enough.
Bath of jelly it's a funny sort of one. When we started off making jellies, we kept on getting these lots of inquiries of people that wanted large amounts of jelly. And we'd ask what it's for, and they'd be sort of slightly evasive. And then someone came out and said, well, it's for something we do called splosh. And then we Googled. Okay. Look it up.
You mean people do it as a thing?
Well, there's actually a number of different things. You have plunging, where you put your arms in piles of fruit. There's tramping, where you stamp on barefoot or in boots with heels. And there's huffing. And there's also cake sitting.
Another question, please.
Which is your favourite?
You're not winning.
Yes, there's somebody at the back. And my apologies, I've messed up on gender, and I apologize to you again, madam, for calling you a man. Go ahead.
Where do you think your food projects will be in 10 years' time? How big do you think they'll get?
Well, we keep on doing stuff that's more ambitious. So the biggest thing I can think of in my head at the moment, so it's as far as I can forecast, is dragging an iceberg from Newfoundland to New York and hacking it apart and using that for cocktails. Now, it sounds really stupid, but we worked with a physicist who is also is at Cambridge, and he is also on the British sailing team. And he worked out that it's 1,000 times more energy efficient to do that than to make ice in a conventional ice maker. The only hitch is, so it's great, it's really energy efficient, we're saving the world. The only problem is it's incredibly expensive because they move icebergs all the time. They put trawler lines around them, and they have these big super tugs move them out of shipping lanes, away from oil rigs where they're in danger of sort of fouling the rig. The only problem is those things cost 50 grand to hire a day, and it might take 90 days. So that's the thing we're working around for 10 years.
Thank you very much. I'm afraid we're going to have to move on. I'm so sorry. We may well have time at the end. It depends on how Dr. Mark Post gets. But for now, ladies and gentlemen, please thank Sam.
Just one thing.
Yes. Sam wishes to give the presentation. Is that right?
Absolutely. I was just going to say, can we have a cheer? I'll point at the people that did questions, and everyone cheers, and loudest one gets the tea towel, yeah? Okay, we ready? Okay, so in the corner. Way. In the front. Oh, sorry. In the back. Oh, it's yours.
Well done.
Oh, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, and thank you. You can do that later. Yes, thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, Sam Bompas. And now our final speaker. Well done. Yes? Good round for him again. Our final speaker is Dr. Mark Post. He received his medical degree from the University of Utrecht. He's worked at KNAW Inter-University, Harvard, and Dartmouth in the United States. Professor of Vascular Physiology at Maastricht, and Professor of Angiogenesis at the Technical University of Eindhoven. He's authored over 140 scientific papers and has received close to $30 million in funding. He's at the leading edge of in vitro meat, which he's going to talk about now. There is a report of someone who has tasted this in vitro meat, a Russian journo who grabbed it out of a dish in his lab and stuffed it into his mouth. He said it was chewy. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Mark Post.
Well, thank you very much. This is a hard act to follow, of course, and especially with this fluorescein here, which we use to mark blood vessels in tissues that we grow. It's really good. It works perfectly. So I'm going to talk about an old idea that actually was brought up by Churchill in 1932 in his book Thoughts and Adventures, where he said, well, you know, why grow a whole chicken if you only eat the breast and the wing? And he got the idea, and of course not completely by himself. He was befriended with Alexis Carrel, the Nobel Prize-winning physiologist who kept organs alive for the first time ever outside of the body. So to introduce the concept of what we were trying to do to make meat out of cultured organs or cells.
Here's a question for you.
Video for you.
How much meat does our world eat in just one day? The numbers are alarming, all the more because current production methods will not be able to meet future demand. If you include the crops grown for animals to eat, currently more than 70% of all arable land is occupied by livestock. Also, keeping livestock for food produces significant amounts of greenhouse gases, such as methane and carbon dioxide. Pigs and cows transform only 15% of vegetable proteins into edible animal proteins, and to produce 1 kilogram of beef, up to 15,000 liters of water is required. In the near future, both meat and other staple foods are likely to become expensive luxury items. The World Health Organization recently estimated that demand for meat is going to double in the next 40 years. But a pioneering new technology is being developed that offers a solution to all those problems. And this is how it works. First, muscle tissue is harvested by biopsy in a small and harmless procedure. Next, the biopsy is cut into minuscule pieces to separate the muscle fibers and cells. Now, let's take a closer look at this tissue through the microscope. The muscle tissue consists of fat cells and muscle cells, both of which are used to produce cultured meat. By dissecting the muscle cells, stem cells are harvested and cultured. The cells start dividing. Eventually, from one muscle stem cell, more than 1 trillion stem cells can be grown. These cells naturally merge together to form so-called myotubes, which are no longer than 0.3 millimeters. The muscle is then grown by lining them up between 2 Velcro anchor points. Muscle's innate tendency to contract causes it to put on bulk, growing into a small piece of muscle tissue. From one small piece of tissue, this pioneering technique can produce more than 1 trillion strands. When all of these little pieces of muscle are then layered together and combined with cultured pieces of fat, you actually get exactly the same product as we started with: meat. But there's more to this meat than meets the eye. The technology has some healthy benefits too. It allows control over the level of fat content. It can eradicate human disease contracted from livestock, and the meat can be given the perfect balance of necessary nutrients. What's more, the technique benefits the environment too. It can lead the way to cruelty-free meat, with a production process that is environmentally friendly, providing a sustainable meat source ready for the demands of the future. The end result is meat, exactly as we know it, but produced in a far more efficient, sustainable, and animal-friendly way. As new methods are found to scale up production, cultured beef could be on its way to a dinner plate near you.
Okay, so if this is true, where would the gelatin then come from? Because the gelatin, the other person that you are using, is coming from animal bones. And that's by far the largest production system. So when we start producing meat a different way and get rid of at least most of the animals, then gelatin would become a scarce item. So you should look for another gig, I guess. I suggest to use agar instead. Anyway, for meat being produced this way, you've now seen the reasons why. There are important reasons to do this. Not many people realize it, but we are facing a meat crisis very quickly now. So there are important reasons to do this, and there is a technology that is capable of replacing meat production, albeit that we are still far away from getting into a dinner plate near you. In fact, at the end of November, we will have the first hamburger, which cost about 250,000 euro. Two technicians of mine have worked on that for about 3 months, growing 40 billion cells. And so it's still quite a labor-intensive and not very efficient process. But for it to succeed, we figured that there were 2 major items. It needs to be efficient. You've seen that the animals are very inefficient, so we need to be more efficient. And it needs to mimic meat. We have meat substitutes galore, but there is some craving in us that wants to really eat meat. So we need to make meat and not a substitute. So in order to make it efficient, there are a lot of variables that you can work with, and we have tried a fair number of them. You can work with the culture medium, with we have to get rid of the serum eventually, which is doable. We have already shown that, but it still needs a little bit of work. You need to go quicker from 2D to 3D culture, and you can use potentially saltwater algae to feed the cells, because we still need to feed the cells. Currently, for this hamburger, we need 60 billion cells, which is 200 of these flasks, these plastic flags that are non-recyclable, 10 layers with cells, and we need 200 of those, which fit in a large incubator. And if you stick to this process, which we're using right now, eventually for every 10 people you would need a 25,000 liter, which is a big swimming pool, incubator to accommodate that. So this is our incubator right now with all these flats of cells, these 60 billion cells that we are growing. And this is just to point out, this guy is 4 times as big as this one. And this contains actually much more cells, because this is now the 3D tissue, those strips that you saw in the movie, that we are harvesting, freezing, and then glued together to form a hamburger. So we do need to feed them sugars, proteins, and fatty acids, which gives, which is mentioned also in the video, the opportunity to play a little bit with it and to maybe even make healthier meat with polyunsaturated fatty acids. Or we could use saltwater algae to grow them. And the first factory could, for instance, be at the mouth of the Mississippi, where there is an algae dead zone. We just fish out all the algae out of the ocean and feed it to our cells. And if you do that, and there are a lot of assumptions here, you can reduce the amount of water and land and energy tremendously by producing the meat this way. So we also need to make it really like meat and nothing else, not really a substitute. So we need to think about taste, color, and texture, mouth feel, if you like. That's not going to be very easy. One nice thing about these cells is that they organize the tissue themselves. So we don't need to do a whole lot about them. If you put them in a gel in between 2 anchor points, after 24 hours, they have built a muscle in between those anchor points. And they will start to bulk up protein, and they will start to contract, actually, and start to look really like muscle. Of course, you can also zap them, electrically stimulate them, which is not very energy efficient, I admit. But then, under the microscope, it looks exactly like a skeletal muscle fiber. So you can mimic the exact same tissue in vitro. And of course, we are conditioning them in various ways to get from this animal to this one. This, by the way, is a Blanc Bleu Belge, which is a cow that has a natural mutation that was discovered by the Belgians just after the World War. And they decided to breed with it, and it has a mutation in myostatin, which limits the, myostatin usually limits the protein production by muscle cells, the hypertrophy by muscle cells. So if you don't have that, you get these animals, which is not very natural. They cannot give birth naturally, so you need to do cesarean section. But now 95% of all the meat in Belgium is taken from these, well, this is a bull, but from these animals. And we are taking actually the stem cells from it to see whether we can. This is a contracting muscle. So if you, it contracts by itself, but if you stimulate it, it contracts a little bit more and it starts to make more protein. So you get better to the area where you need to be, to the real meat. These are the strands in between 2 Velcro strips, by the way, also from the local Tesco. So they develop in about 3 weeks in between those strips, and then we harvest them. Right now we actually grow them in donuts, so we don't even need the Velcro anymore. But it's the same principle. They need these anchor points to bulk up protein. And of course, they are still pretty white. There's no blood in there. The red in blood is hemoglobin when it's exposed to oxygen. In muscle, actually, there's not really a whole lot of blood, but there is myoglobin, which is a protein that's very similar to hemoglobin, and it turns red when exposed to oxygen. And if you just grow these cells under low oxygen conditions, you get a 5-fold increase in myoglobin production. So you can play with color, with all these variables, all these culture variables, to get to a product that eventually is the same as meat. We also, it was reported that you could add caffeine, so coffee, to these hamburgers, which would be great because you would stay awake after a hamburger. Some people Couldn't eat them at night, of course, but unfortunately, it didn't really improve the myoglobin concentration a lot, so we forgot about that idea. And you might think, you know, it's not only muscle meat, it's also fat, and it's bone maybe, and it's even bone marrow. Can you make that as well? Of course we can. Actually, fat has already been grown. We know what to do, how to grow that. This is not an experiment by ourselves, but from somebody else who in 4 weeks grew a tiny piece of fat from fat stem cells. And this is our own example where all the red stuff is all fat from adipose tissue derived stem cells from that same biopsy. So how are you going to produce it? Well, you could potentially produce it in your own kitchen. These stem cells that we use that replicate, they survive freeze drying. So you could order your little bag of, this is salmon, a bag of stem cells from any animal or creature from the internet and then start to grow your meat in your own kitchen. Of course, you need to know 6 weeks in advance what you're going to eat because it takes a while. But it's doable. So one of the big questions is, who is going to eat this? And if you ask people in the streets of London, so randomly, you know, are you going to eat meat from a factory or from a laboratory? They say, no, are you kidding me? But if you rephrase that question and you, well, you know, let's see 20, 30 years from now, if you hit the supermarket and you see these two products on the shelves and they're exactly the same and they taste the same and the quality is the same, but this is the real thing. It's now 4 times as expensive because it has an eco-tax and there's this nasty label on it that animals have suffered for that product. And it's exactly the same and the price is right. What are you going to do, right? And I think it will eventually be, that will be a problem that can be conquered. There are a couple of other issues. Of course, we need to industrialize it, scale it up, which is quite a challenge, but it can be done. You can make them from different tissues. I've already shown that. And then eventually, this is where you end up, right? You can, with a complete, clear conscience, keep eating your hamburger. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I have one quick question while you people are making up your minds to put your hands up. Mark, could you just explain to us, you said it would take up space. If you had it in your kitchen, how much space would it take up if you were you know, growing them at home, as it were?
Well, right now we have these incubators. They are big refrigerators, and we have 3 of them to grow 1 hamburger.
So it would be take up a lot of
depends
space.
on how large your family is, and
right.
but
eventually you hope it'll be a smaller.
Oh yeah.
All right. Looking at yes, you, madam, and then you, madam. Go ahead, please. You can shout. It's fine.
Okay. Where is the funding currently coming from this, and are any governments on board to move it forwards?
That's an extremely good question because the 30 million funding was not for this hamburger.
But yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I do actually a couple of other things. This is sort of an expensive hobby that spun out of control. But this is currently coming from a philanthropist. I cannot really reveal his name right now. That will be revealed at the end of November or beginning of December.
Absolutely. I should have made that clear. The funding is about 300,000 euros, is it? Or?
Well, it has risen to 400,000.
Okay, fair enough. So all that 30 million wasn't for this. Yes, madam.
Right.
Yes, please.
Aren't you going to create a 2-tier sort of food snobism that Mr. Gill was railing against earlier? So we'll have the bacon and somebody else will have the fakin.
Right, that's a very good one. Well, you know, we should have thought about that, Dave. I think that eventually that will not happen. This is kind of bold, but you know, let me get there. In the Netherlands, it's now forbidden to sell in the supermarket battery hand-laid eggs. We have 2 identical products. One is free-range egg, one is battery hand-laid egg. They are identical products. But now the government has just banned it. If 20, 30 years from now we have these two alternatives and they're exactly the same, and you have as a government or regulatory agency the option of allowing production of meat through environmentally safe and animal-friendly methods, I think eventually it will be banned, to be honest. It's a scary thought, but I think that will happen.
One more, thank you. Yes, go ahead.
I just wanted to mention, A.A. Gill at the beginning said that we only use a very small percentage of plants and animals for food in the world. So I know that there's a bit of experimentation with using insects for food for the future. And can you mention anything about that, or do you have shed some light on whether or not we should be looking at the sources that exist already on Earth rather than creating artificial foods to feed the populations?
Well, there are actually a number of different questions in there. One is, artificial food. I don't consider this artificial food. It's an artificial production of food, but it ends up being the same food that we are used to, which is, I think, the whole idea. And so we are working under the assumption that that people have an innate craving to eat meat. Vegetarians constitute about 3 to 5% of the population. The number doesn't increase in spite of what we all know about the meat production, and in spite of that we consciously are aware that there are issues with it. But that number really doesn't increase. So there is something in us that wants to eat meat. And there is something in us, at least in the part of the country, the world where we are living, that don't want to eat insects. Now, if you could, one of my friends has been advocating eating insects for about 20 years, and he is, it's a difficult task, but he is so much into the insects that he wants to feed them as they are, to people, with the legs and with the shields and with the wings and the whole thing, and the kind of like little antennas. Whereas if you would just mash them up and use the protein and make a product out of that, that could be a very efficient way of producing protein-rich foods.
Excellent. I'm afraid, ladies and gentlemen, we've come to the end. I'm sorry there hasn't been time for more questions. Please thank our speakers, A.A. Gill, thanks very much, and thanks to you all for coming out. Good night.